How many grandparents do we have here today? How many of you would have started with grandkids and skipped the kids? Right? For those of you that have little children, it gets better. Wait till they grow up and they have children. It's so much fun. It's a lot easier, and you don't worry about the sugar. In fact, you feed them sugar. So it's all that great stuff. As my wife and I, again, were spending last weekend with our family there, and we're celebrating the second birthday of our youngest grandson, Tabor. We were coming back, and it was a little bit sentimental. You know, we just spent a great weekend. Now we had to go home. And I turned to, well, I got to give a speech next Friday. It's kind of the downer, right? You know, planning the speech. Figure out, what am I going to talk about? First thing I thought of was tell you how great my grandchildren are. Well, quickly that became longer than a 6-minute speech, so I had to find another topic. I said, well, you know, what about grandparenting? And thinking about, what did my grandparents teach me? And not only that, but am I teaching my grandkids the things that I learned from my grandparents? I don't know if you've done the exercise, but it was the first time I really sat down and put on paper what I learned from my grandparents. It was great. I mean, it was something I wished I'd have done a long time ago. But also, you know, taking those and reflecting back on the weekend. What did we cover? Well, to start with, my grandparents, my first icebreaker speech was back in the old format, so I took the opportunity to do a second one under the new format. I grew up on a farm in Kansas, and my grandparents, I was very fortunate, my grandparents lived very close. I'm not sure it was always the best for my parents because they had to deal with family issues, but for a kid, it was ideal. My father's mother and father lived probably about a football field's length from our house. You could throw rocks at it and hit it. Not that I ever did that, my brother did several times. We were over there all the time. So W.I., or Will, and Sadie lived in that house. In fact, W.I., or Gramps we called him, was born and was raised in that house. He was very passionate about the farm, but they had suffered a couple things. If any of you grew on farms, and during the Dust Bowls of Kansas, they struggled with what they did, so they had to become very resourceful. But my grandfather, my grandparents' oldest son, was killed in World War I, and he was supposed to be the person that come back and took over the farm. So it was a big devastation to them. And my grandfather had a farming accident about 2 years later. The hand on his left arm was severed, so he had kind of a stub there. His right arm was fractured, and they took him to a hospital and was infected. But they give him the new antibiotic that just come out, sulfus. But he had a really bad reaction to it. And the arm never really healed. He was actually cattywampus. So it would bend a little bit every time. So he dealt with all kinds of physical disabilities, but he was always positive. The thing I learned from my grandfather was, in spite of what you're facing, you can be positive. The other thing that I learned from him was he was always trying to make things better. Whether it was going out and buying the newest variety of wheat that would make a bigger production crop, buying a new bull to add new genetics to the herd, making sure his grandchildren always did their best. I always learned you could be positive and look for things to improve, regardless of your situation. His wife, Sadie, we called her Mamby. I'm not sure where it is. I think the oldest grandchild actually gets to name the grandparents, and everybody else has to follow that name. But she was a little short German lady, but she was very dedicated to the family. She was most devastated by the loss of their son. And because of that, she wanted to keep family close together. And one of the things that she did was always made fresh bread every day, and she made cookies. And so the enticing thing was she would bring people to her house so she could kind of gather them every day to see that they were well. But fresh bread and cookies were a great thing for kids to come there, and we flocked there. My mother's parents lived a mile away across an acre of native Kansas prairie. You could get there in 5 minutes, maybe quicker, depending on who was driving the vehicle around the section. But my grandfather, I always remember him as being an old person. He was 15 years older than my grandmother, and I never remember him being very young. And I called my sister and said, do we have a nickname for Grandpa Wineland? She says, no, we really didn't. But the thing about him that I remember is he was very analytical, and he was very conservative. Maybe it's conservative to a fault, but I always look. But he was on many boards, school board, township boards, church boards. People come to him for his wisdom because he could take information, process it, and provide an answer. My grandmother, on my mother's side, Esther, we called her Gran, she and I shared a special connection. I was born on her 50th birthday. It was a fact that I always reminded my siblings that I was her favorite because we shared a birthday. But she was the most generous person. She would have her Bible, do her Bible study every day, never missed a church service, but never missed an opportunity to provide a huge meal for anybody and everybody that would come to her house afterwards. She was known for her cakes, known for her baking. But the thing that I think most people referred or that she was best known for was her generosity and her ability to sit there and listen. She was always there to listen, and she would always tell the kids, I'm always here for you, no matter what you do, and always listen, and I will always love you forever. So I was thinking about all these things and thinking about the weekend. We had lots of time to plan, analyze things, try to do better, figure out ways to do things. But the most important thing, I think it wrapped it up, was when our 2-year-old grandson, after a full day of birthday, took a shower, come back, and was looking for Pop-Pop, that's me, snuggled on my lap, and went to sleep. That never-ending love is, I think, was most important. Thank you.